North American urbanism is very oriented towards Europe. It's a place lots of us have visited and are familiar with. It's a good reference point to say, hey, do you remember when you visited Spain and took trains everywhere and walked to cafes? Why can't we have that here? This is sometimes criticized for forgetting the rest of the world. While it's further away and more expensive to visit, Japan has just as many interesting policies and ideas as any country in Europe, for example. Another problem with this approach is that it's very focused on the places you go and the priorities you have as a tourist. Lots of people visit Paris and come back thinking, this city is lovely and it mostly tops out at 8-story buildings. Why does any city really need to go any higher? But Paris has lots of taller buildings. They're just mainly in the suburbs where you probably didn't spend most of your vacation. Oh, and there's that Eiffel Tower thing. And the height limit in the central city probably has bad effects too. Height limits have been linked to more expensive housing, sprawl, congestion, and longer commutes. Paris specifically is known for having small apartments, and it's hard to argue that this is entirely unrelated to limitations on housing supply and newer buildings. These downsides mainly affect residents though, not tourists. As a tourist, you see the upsides, like nice views and historic buildings. We're not even saying that height limits and historic preservation are necessarily wrong in this context. European city centers with their history and tourism have considerations most places don't have. But there are downsides that you don't experience so much as a tourist. There are reasons not to import these policies to cities back home. Here's the question. How do we use people's vacation experiences as a springboard for talking about city design, without falling too much into thinking about cities through the perspective and priorities of a tourist? How do we learn from Europe without turning into the age-old stereotype of the annoying North American always raving about how much more sophisticated Europe is? How do we also learn lessons from interesting and successful cities in the rest of the world that fewer North Americans have visited?
People often ask us about urban crime as a barrier to city living, and we've never had much of a response. Canada doesn't really have the same concept of a dangerous inner city versus the safe suburbs that you find in some other countries. We wish people asking this question would understand that this idea of urban crime and disorder is not universal. With that said, it doesn't come from nowhere either. We visited San Francisco last year, and while the idea of the city as a war zone is overblown, some things were shocking, like the hard drug use around Market Street downtown, all the signs warning about car break-ins, and the sketchy stuff we saw on transit. It seemed like every second or third trip on BART, we saw people acting erratically, doing hard drugs, throwing bottles, or making threats. We saw a police canine operation. We felt like we had to keep our guard up in a way that we don't usually have to, while taking transit back home. It was hard to tell what the chances of actually being harmed were, but it was kind of like biking in heavy traffic. It's still unpleasant, even if you don't get hit. It was enough that if we lived in San Francisco, we'd probably be at least a little less inclined to take transit. Here's the question. How do we approach the topic of crime or disorder reasonably? On one hand, a lot of people's perceptions are outdated or skewed. New York is nothing like it was in the 70s and 80s. And outside of the contexts we mentioned, San Francisco felt familiar and safe. At the same time, urbanists can ignore people's concerns at our peril. Urbanism is all about quality public spaces and amenities, and that requires safety and comfort in public. If taking public transit is unpleasant, people will drive more. If public parks and plazas aren't good places to be, people will want a backyard. How do we set reasonable expectations for city life? Someone asking you for money on the street isn't a big deal, but hard drug use in public is legitimately off-putting, especially if you have kids with you.
The reason so many people have a revelatory experience when visiting Denmark or the Netherlands is that when you actually experience it, having good bike infrastructure is so obviously good. Even the crankiest anti-bike advocates would have a hard time keeping up their attitude if they actually visited one of these places. The problem is that back home we can't offer people this finished product, at least not yet. We can only offer progress towards it. And the in-between state where you have some bike infrastructure but not enough can be messy and scary. Someone might see their closest parking spot removed for a bike lane that they won't use, and that might not even get a ton of use by other people yet. We can tell them it's one step in a bigger plan, and that the city will develop more of a network and bike culture over the next 5 to 10 years. But that can feel abstract and uncertain, especially to people who've never even been to a bike-friendly city before. Montreal seems to be past the tipping point, where each new bike route adds to an obviously useful and well-used bike network, and there's not a lot of room for people to say, no one will ride a bike here, when we have examples like this, but lots of other cities aren't at that critical mass yet. How do we make the prospect of a bike-friendly city feel real and relevant in a place that doesn't have a clear local success story or model? How do we address residents and businesses with empathy about short-term disruption, while recognizing that slowing down or watering down these changes will, most of the time, only make the transition worse?
Public transit in a bigger, denser city is not just a nice to have. It's essential for the basic functioning of a city. If you shut down the subway in Toronto, Chicago, or New York, there would be absolute chaos. It's not possible for everyone to get where they're going in a private car. There just isn't enough room for the roads, highways, and parking lots that would take. As a result, support for transit in these places is very strong in our experience. People debate the type of transit, like metros versus trams, and there's still a sensitivity about bus lanes or anything that takes space away from cars. But almost everyone understands that cars alone won't cut it. Even Rob Ford, former mayor of Toronto who championed the suburbs against the downtown elites, enthusiastically supported building subways in his car-centric way.
The taxpayers want, I was elected on subways. They want subways. I was out on Saturday. People want subways.
But not every city is like this. In cities that are smaller, lower density, and highway heavy, it is possible for most trips to be done by car. We know this because a lot of cities currently work like that. In places like St. John's, Newfoundland, the vast majority of commuters get to work by car. And it's not like they're trapped in traffic hell either, at least not like they would be in bigger cities. Obviously, from our perspective, car-centric planning and design is bad here too. Seniors who can't drive are left isolated, kids trying to get around on their own are left with dangerous streets, and there are a dozen other downsides we could talk about. But to a big slice of the population, maybe even the majority, going all in on cars can feel like it works in a smaller, low-density city like this, in a way that you couldn't even pretend it works in Toronto or New York. What are the prospects for urbanism in small to mid-sized cities that aren't necessarily forced by sheer traffic volumes to consider public transit or bike infrastructure? Are we capable of adopting good urbanism by choice instead of by necessity? Are there certain changes that are less likely to get pushback, like turning sidewalks into multi-use pathways, because it's not seen as threatening to driving?
A central theme of urbanism is criticizing all of the grotesque ways that the speed of car traffic is prioritized over the safety and convenience of anyone outside of a car. We advocate for safer street design and better enforcement to slow cars down, especially on residential streets. But setting aside the downsides of fast cars, being able to travel places quickly is actually pretty important. The biggest one is that faster travel means more access to jobs and opportunity. Research shows that access to lots of jobs within a reasonable commuting time is extremely important for the upward mobility of households and the overall prosperity of a city. A city where it takes forever to get anywhere is a dysfunctional city. So in rejecting speed for cars as the number one priority, how do we lean into speed for other modes, especially transit but also cycling? There are some obvious answers like more bus lanes, high-speed rail, more direct cycling routes, and wider bike lanes to accommodate riders at different speeds. But there might be more difficult questions too. While every transit mode has its place, maybe we should lean into regional rail and automated metros over street-running trams and light rail when possible. Lots of urbanists really like trams or streetcars for aesthetic reasons, maybe because of the European model, and we get it, but they're often not very fast. This really hits close to home for us because of the Rem de l'Est project in Montreal, which seems like it's being downgraded from a faster automated metro to a slower tram for largely aesthetic reasons. But if we're going to be remotely serious about alternatives to driving, speed needs to be a serious priority.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, and a special thanks to our supporters on Patreon.